Stare dobre czasy. A teraz tylko zapierdol od rana do nocy. Aj, Janusz, Janusz, żebyś ty chociaż jakiś grosz z tego miał. No i co trąbi, nie pali się? No dobra, pora pozbyć się jedynej rudej, która leci na autosepka. Gdzie ja dałem tę szlifierkę?
Oczy pełne snów, w myślach mięknie pewność, w ustach brak mi słów. Piękna cyganeczko, najpiękniejsza w całej wsi. Odkąd cię ujrzałem, w myślach tobie się zakochałem.
Oj, zajebiście. Odcięli mi prąd. Czyli jednak nie blefowali z tym wezwaniem do zapłaty. Czujesz, Janusz? Tak pachnie darmowy prąd. Elegancko. Żeby tylko sąsiad się nie kapnął.
W tobie się zakochałem. Gdy zobaczy taką bestię.
Ale dziadostwo. Kiedyś to człowiek jedną tarczą setkę katalizatorów upierdolił. A teraz co? Jednorazówki.
zakochałem. Każdy ruch mój serca im zamroczy. Łobuz, łobuz, wszystkie mnie kochają, choć wiedzą, że czasem kłopoty mam w raju. Łobuz, łobuz, serca mi oddają, na siłowni jestem królem, tego nie udają. Łobuz, wszystkie mnie kochają, choć wiedzą, że czasem kłopoty mam w raju. Kłopoty mam w raju. Łobuz, łobuz, serca mi oddają, na siłowni jestem królem, tego nie udają. W tobie się zakochałem. Choć wiedzą, że czasem kłopoty mam w raju. Łobuz, łobuz, serca mi oddają, na siłowni jestem królem, tego nie udają.
No i chuj.
Gładka jak szkło, tak musi być. Każda bryka będzie śnić. Oj, trochę turdzy zostało. Dobra, chuj, będzie. Będzie! Szpachla robi swoje czary, blacha lśni jak nigdy stary. Żadna rdza się nie ostanie, a usługi jego tanie. Gdy pewnego lata twoją twarz ujrzałem, uczuciem gorącym wtedy zapałałem. Twoje czarne włosy, oczy pełne snów, w myślach mięknie pewność, w ustach brak mi słów. Piękna cyganeczko, najpiękniejsza w całej wsi. Odkąd cię ujrzałem, w myślach jesteś tylko ty. Moja kochaneczko, najpiękniejsza w całej gminie. Każdy chłopak marzy o takiej dziewczynie. W księżyca blasku dla mnie tak tańczyłaś. W twoich czarnych włosach usta me spowiłaś. Choć mówili do mnie, zapomnij o niej, lecz ja serce tobie się zakochałem. Czy to w martwym I'm not real, just a voice in the room. Ooh, I'm not real, but I sing for you. Soft light, old tape, no shade. I'm not real, but I stay. Don't fade away. I'm not real, but I'm near. Ooh, still here. No warm hand, no shadow on the wall. Ooh, no name to call. Still I hear it all. Soft light, old tape, no face. I'm not real, but I stay. Don't fade away. I'm not real, but I'm near. Ooh, still here. If I dream, is it mine? If I cry, is it time? I'm not real, not real. But the song still feels. I'm not real. I'm not się zakochałem.
kurwa.
The sky weeps rust, the ground drinks fear. A shadow of whispers drawing near. The streets are graves, the wind's a hymn, and every breath tastes sharp and grim. The walls bleed stories long forgot, of lives undone, of hope left to rot. In hollow homes the echoes cry, a requiem for those who couldn't say goodbye. In the land of ashes we walk alone, through broken cities, through blood and bone. The living haunt the dead haunt the skies, and in this hollow silence the last song lies. The moon is cracked, its light runs cold. The earth wears scars no time can hold. Steel skeletons pierce the ashen veil, where dreams once stood, now shadows wail. We barter days for fleeting nights, trading our fears for the will to fight. But in the dark, when courage wanes, the past still murmurs through the chains. In the land of ashes we walk alone, through broken cities, through blood and bone. The living haunt the dead haunt the skies, and in this hollow silence the last song lies. The flames of dawn burn low and frail, as ghosts of time recount their tale. We carry the weight of shattered years, and drown our doubts in blood and tears.
I stumbled on Mike's channel one day. His video showed games in a genuine way. No sugarcoating, just honest and bright. His takes on games felt just right. Just all in one source, that spark in the dark. Reigniting my love for the games we embark. Three different souls.
Halo, dlaczego mój samochód zgasł na pierwszym zakręcie po wyjechaniu z twojego warsztatu, he? Zapłacisz mi za to.
John and that's that come what may. Mike and John, their duo was tight. Playing together, they took flight. I joined in.
O, na co się gapicie? Pakować go do bagażnika. Teraz zobaczy, co to znaczy zajść mi za skórę mechanik od 7 boleści. Oj, nie zaziera się z Jarzyną.
Three different souls from distant shores.
O Jezu, moja głowa. Ty, gdzie ja kurwa jestem?
Co jest?
No nie pali, no.
Kurwa widzę, że nie pali. Cholera jasna, Jarzyna nas zabije. Dopiero co był z nim u mechanika.
Dobra, czekaj. Mam plan. Panie mechanik! Pobudka. Robota jest. Trzeba naprawić tego gruchota.
A że co, ja?
Nie kurwa, ja. Bierzesz się do roboty, czy wolisz go dopchać do Jarzyny?
No, skoro tak stawiacie sprawę. No, kto to tak A, no tak, ja. Robiłem ten wóz jakiś czas temu, no i chlusnęło mi się trochę za dużo wody do zbiornika. Aż dziwne, że tak długo jeździł.
Co tam mruczysz?
Nie, nic. Pod maską wszystko gra. Wygląda, jakby ktoś wam zatankował chrzczone paliwo. Trzeba je odessać, wlać porządne i na bank ruszy. Potem jeździć i obserwować.
No to jazda. Kanister i wężek są w bagażniku.
Mike's honest voice and Shonda's mind. In every word, through Charlie we three different souls from distant shores, but together with Mike,
Dobra, teraz powinien odpalić.
Wspaniale. A teraz spierdalaj, zanim się rozmyślę.
Serio?
Ta, a my jedziemy szukać tego chujka, który wlał nam chrzczone paliwo. Okazuje się, że jest na tej wsi jeszcze mechanik, który ma bardziej pse strany niż ty.
Dobra, to ja spadam. Dzięki, chłopaki. A, gówno. Tutaj my idziemy znowu. Co? Nie wiem, dlaczego to powiedziałem. Chyba mi się mózg zresetował po tym wpierdolu. Zaraz. Aż takiego sypu to ja nie zostawiłem. No i wszystko jasne. Robota karku Wierzyny. Już widzę, że narzędzia rozkradli. Kasę pewnie też zajebali. Zobaczmy, czy coś się stało.
No dobrze, dobrze. Punkt dla ciebie. Przechytrzyłeś tych głąbów. Nie myśl jednak, że to koniec. W najbliższym czasie spodziewaj się małej wizyty.
No, nie strasz, nie strasz, bo się...
Coś ty powiedział?
A nic, coś przerywa, do widzenia.
W tobie się zakochałem.
Lala, ale zapieczona ta śruba. Jebaniutka, trzyma się mocniej niż wójt stołka. No cóż, na to jest tylko jedna rada. WD-69. No dobra, wezmę gąbkę z kuchni, zanim to, co na niej wyrosło, wynajdzie koło. Dobry majster nigdzie się nie rusza bez swojego klucza, a taki jak ja, tym bardziej. Dobra, pora jechać na akcję. Poszukamy czegoś, co zastąpi kierownicę. coś jest dostatecznie okrągłe, to znaczy, że może być kierownicą.
Nowie trzyma i już nie moc. Zostaje blisko czas. Moje oczy ono w świat. Jakby wieła nawet masz. Lecz swobodny world. Ty są za wiarę nagle. Idziesz tu. Tańcz mi graj tu wszystko tu.
O, idealny zamiennik. Może się trochę będzie pienił, ale ściemnie, że to taka nowa formuła. Saby Kamilowi odrdzewi z tego szrota. No ale Krzysiu Jarzyna zabrał wszystkie narzędzia. No nic, pora wybrać się do sklepu. Dobry, potrzebuję kupić coś do prac blacharskich. No wie pan, żeby rdze zedrzeć.
No to masz pan dwie opcje. Droga szlifierka albo tania szczotka ryżowa.
Nie, no to raczej szczotka. Jakby to powiedzieć, jestem spłukany.
Służę uprzejmie.
jakiś żal. Może śmieją się, że marzę, że za duży we mnie plan. Lecz gdy klawisz w radiu płynie, jestem królem wszystkich tras. Kaseta gra, droga gna, noc prowadzi mnie. Serce ma rytm jak światła dwa, co migają gdzieś we mgle. Kaseta gra, droga gna, wiatr za oknem śpi. Hej dziewczyno, jeśli czekasz,
Biznes z życia, nie powiem. A propos biznesmenów. Gienek z naprzeciwka ostatnio coś ode mnie chciał. Trzeba by do niego zajrzeć. Uszanowanko, sąsiedzie. Podobno potrzebujesz pomocy. O co chodzi?
Czołem, młody! Zjawiłeś się w samą porę! Słuchaj, w domu trochę zimno, nie ma czym palić, powoli kończą mi się opony. Załatwiłbyś mi jakieś drewno opałowe, co? Ja już jestem za stary na targanie drzewa z lasu.
To nie lepiej, żebym przyniósł jeszcze trochę opon?
Nie, już była ostatnio u mnie milicja i się czepiali.
Panie, a skąd ja panu wezmę drewno?
Róż głowo, za twoją chałupą w lesie jest wycinka drzew, tak? No pożycz trochę.
Ta, pożycz. A to niby legalne.
Tak samo jak palenie oponami. Nie gadaj już, tylko do roboty.
Kurwa. Ja pierdolę. Kurwa. kurwa. Kurwa! Ja pierdolę. Dobra, zgodnie z zamówieniem masz pan to swoje drewno.
O, Bóg, zapłać głody. Ogólnie to przyjmę każdą ilość. Także jakbyś miał coś, to śmiało wpadaj, odkupię. A tak w ogóle, to jak ty szabrowałeś drewno, to twój sąsiad się tu kręcił i cię szukał. Powiedział, że zaczeka na ciebie przed domem.
Oho, a ten czego chce? Mam nadzieję, że nie znalazł kabla.
He?
Nie, nic. Dzięki, panie Gienku, zdrowia.
W tobie się zakochałem.
Kurwa.
Like a tenant too broke to move, patching the same cracked places with thinner and thinner hands. Even the mirror quit arguing, it just holds my face.
Witam sąsiada. Co pana do mnie sprowadza, panie Andrzeju?
Śreju, nie Andrzeju, przyszedłem powiedzieć, że mi coraz bardziej działasz na nerwy, Janusz. Po pierwsze, primo, myślisz, że nie widziałem, jak przychodzisz na moją posesję przez dziurę w płocie? Nie wiem, coś tam szukał, ale koniec tego dobrego, bo dziura załatana. A po drugie, primo, ile razy mam jeszcze powtarzać, że ogrodzenie wchodzi pół metra na moją działkę? To niedopuszczalne, sąsiedzie.
Sąsiedzie, ale po co te nerwy? Był geodeta? Był. No i co powiedział?
Żaden geodeta. Dobrze wiem, jak wygląda twój szwagier. Zresztą wiem, że cię go o dupcu nie stać na geodetę.
Aha, tak rozmawiamy, tak? W takim razie proszę natychmiastowe opuszczenie mojej działki, bo ja jestem bardzo zajęty przeprowadzaniem tej diagnostyki pojazdowej.
A pójdę. Masz kurwa 3 dni. A jak nie, to sam przestawię ten płot w pizdu.
Side the street keeps us dead the way old men keep old tools close, familiar. Two on the
A znalazł się kartograf od 7 boleści. Trzeba być dziadowi napsuć trochę krwi. Skoro załatał płot, to muszę wymyślić jakiś inny sposób. Nie da się dołem, przejdę górą.
grief is not a storm at all, but mildew it spreads softly. It claims the corners first, then one morning you find it in the place where your laughter used to sleep. We don't die when the body drops. We die in smaller rooms and there, and the letters never finish. In the doors we stop walking past. I've been saving scraps of myself, like winter food in rusted tins. But the saddest thing I ever learned is some things don't leave you. They just learn to live within. Yeah, and I've been thinking maybe that's the curse. Not the end of the world, but the end of thirst. End of wonder, end of reach. End of believe inside of peace. You can survive so hard you disappear. Become a routine, a habit, a year. Booze by the door and the face don't flash. Still here, but imagine that. Man can turn into maintenance. His soul can shrink into chores. You call it strength because collapsing would ask him to feel it more. Sometimes I think love is just what remains after the signal fails. A cup left on the table, a side of the bed untouched, the light turned on for no one. Sometimes I think hope is uglier than people say. Not a candle, not a sunrise, more like a splinter. You cannot pull out the small holy irritation, a refusal to heal wrong. So I keep one room unboarded, one window naked to the door. Not because I trust what's coming, but because I need to know I did not bury myself. We don't die when the body drops. We die when we make peace with less. When we call the numbness wisdom. When we dress surrender as rest. I got ghosts in the plastic, rain in the wires, dust where the future is.
Kurde, idzie ta gnida. Trzeba się ewakuować.
So if you hear me singing, it ain't courage, it ain't grace. It's just a sound to prove the house ain't empty yet.
O, do diaska! Co ci zrobił, skarbie? Spokojnie, zaraz pańczu cię zabierze do myjni. Janusz!
O, proszę, pieczony ziemniaczek. Doprawiony cierpieniem sąsiada. Najlepszy. Imker.
W tobie się zakochałem.
Last night, while you were, I don't know, probably eating dinner or watching a show, roughly 44,000 people logged onto the internet, navigated to a live streaming platform, and just sat down to
Witaj,
watch a
stary
complete
druhu.
stranger scrub the rust
Rozdupcony jak
off a
mój
virtual
plan na
public
życie.
bathroom.
Yeah, which is, I mean,
Ale
it
nie
sounds
martw się.
almost completely
Interes powoli
absurd
się
when you frame it
rozkręca.
that way.
A może nie na
because they
tyle,
didn't,
żeby
like,
załatwić
win a
ci same
prize
nowe
for
części.
watching
No,
this.
Bez przesady, nie sram
The person
gotówką.
playing the game didn't
Ale jak się
defeat a
przejdę
final
po wsi,
boss.
to na
There
bank
were
znajdę
zero
jakieś używane,
explosions,
które aż się
no
proszą, żeby je
dramatic plot
przygarnąć.
twists, no high
Zobaczysz,
stakes
jeszcze cię
competition.
postawię na koła, no i
Literally for
może nawet
hours, an
odpalisz.
audience the size of a sold-out baseball stadium just sat there watching digital grime wash down a digital drain.
And we're so conditioned, right, to think of digital entertainment as a delivery system for adrenaline.
Exactly, which is the core of this incredible, honestly baffling modern paradox that we are tackling today. Because if you look at the landscape of modern gaming right now, here in 2026, the adrenaline machine has essentially been unplugged.
Totally unplugged.
Instead, we have millions of people who finish a long, exhausting 8-hour shift at their actual jobs.
Right, battling commutes, managing terrible spreadsheets.
Yeah, dealing with difficult customers, and then they come home, boot up their high-end computers, and they voluntarily do more work.
They do chores.
Literally, they are sweeping virtual driveways. They're like meticulously stocking digital store shelves or diagnosing and repairing virtual car alternators.
And they're actively choosing this over games that were specifically designed to offer pure, unadulterated fantasy.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking on the exploding genre of simulator games.
It's a massive phenomenon right now.
It really is. So, our mission today is to unpack exactly why performing incredibly mundane, repetitive chores in a virtual world is capturing the attention of millions of players.
Right, and we're going to examine the deep and honestly somewhat surprising psychological needs that these games are fulfilling for you and really everyone else who plays them.
Plus, we'll look at how this specific game design is unexpectedly reshaping real-world vocational education, which is just wild to me.
Oh, the education data is fascinating.
And finally, we'll map out where this massive billion-dollar industry is heading as it reaches what looks like a critical mass of oversaturation.
So to do all this, we're synthesizing a really diverse stack of sources today.
Yeah, what are we looking at?
Well, we're pulling data from a 2026 academic study published in the Journal of Leadership and Quality in Education, which looks specifically at 3D simulation
Kurwa.
in trade schools.
Okay, heavy science right there.
Right. But we're pairing that with psychological profiles of global gamers from psychiatrist.com, plus some raw community discussions from the cozy gamer communities over on Reddit.
I love those subreddits.
They're great. And we've also got industry and market analysis from the No Wave Journal regarding this year's market boom, along with some really fantastic cultural analysis from The Ringer and Game Tyrant.
And I have to say, looking through these sources, I realized I am 100% part of this phenomenon.
Oh, really? What's your vice?
I have lost entire weekends to what I like to call everything simulators. You know, things like gas station simulator or TCG card shop simulator.
Oh, the card shop one is dangerously addictive.
It is. I mean, I can spend 3 real-world hours just opening digital cardboard boxes of trading cards, checking the virtual market prices, and perfectly placing them on a little digital shelf.
Right.
But I need to understand the mechanics of this compulsion. Like, why is pricing a digital piece of cardboard so profoundly satisfying when doing the exact same thing in a real retail job would literally make me want to quit?
Well, to understand that gap between real-world drudgery and digital satisfaction, we really have to pull back. We have to look at simulation not just as a video game genre, but actually as a coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism for what, exactly?
Entropy. It's a profound lens into how human beings process the concept of entropy.
Okay, let's define that for the listener, because entropy, that's a physics concept, right?
Exactly.
Like the second law of thermodynamics, the whole idea that all closed systems naturally decline into disorder and chaos.
In physics, yes. But if you apply that to your daily psychology, real life is overwhelmingly entropic.
Oh, I mean, yeah, my kitchen alone proves that.
Right. Your car engine is constantly wearing down. Your kitchen gets dirty 3 times a day, no matter how meticulously you clean it. Your inbox fills up. Paint chips, wood rots, relationships require constant maintenance.
It never ends.
It never ends. You, as a human being, are constantly fighting a losing, exhausting battle against decay. Every single day is a struggle just to maintain the baseline.
So you're saying that when I come home and boot up a game, my brain is just fundamentally tired of fighting that decay.
Precisely. And the Ringer piece from our source stack captures this beautifully. They looked at the absolute juggernaut of this genre, Power Wash Simulator.
Oh man, that game is everywhere.
It is. And the author of that piece describes a session where they spent 2 unbroken hours cleaning a massive, rusted, incredibly filthy digital Ferris wheel.
Just a Ferris wheel. For 2 hours.
2 hours. And the game renders this object in agonizingly specific detail. There are 32 massive support beams,
Wow.
180 individual light bulbs, and 119 vertical slats on the surrounding fence.
That is insane.
And every single square inch is covered in varying layers of grime, moss, and rust. And you just have to stand there and systematically wash them off, one by one.
But wait, if they're putting that much granular detail into a chore, aren't they basically just recreating the exact same entropic nightmare of the real world? Like, how is cleaning 180 digital light bulbs less exhausting than just cleaning my actual bathroom?
Because the simulator offers a closed, completely controllable system that defies reality.
Defies reality how?
Well, in Power Wash Simulator, things stay clean.
Oh, wow.
Right. Once you wash that Ferris wheel, it doesn't just get dirty again tomorrow. The game completely removes the threat of failure and the inevitability of decay.
Which is the opposite of my kitchen.
Exactly. Just consider what it lacks compared to traditional games. There is no health bar. You cannot take damage.
Zero boss fight.
No countdown timer pushing your cortisol levels up. There are no enemies hunting you. You have an infinite supply of water and an infinite amount of time.
I see the contrast there, especially when you look at the broader gaming landscape, because the massive cultural hits leading up to this simulator wave, I'm thinking of games like Elden Ring or Sifu, they were brutally, notoriously difficult.
Oh, they are built entirely on a framework of constant punishing failure.
Right. You die 50 times to a boss just to learn its attack patterns. You are meant to feel small and weak and frustrated until you finally achieve this massive mastery.
And simulators just take that entire friction-based model and throw it completely out the window.
Yeah, they do.
They remove failure because your brain is already processing enough failure and friction in your actual life. The simulator provides a highly isolated environment where effort directly and consistently equals absolute success.
So if I point the digital nozzle at the dirt vanishes. Every single time.
Every single time. It is a reliable, unbroken contract between the player and the world, which, let's be honest, is something real life almost never offers.
It's the fantasy of the magic wand. When I'm playing one of these games, it feels like I've been handed a tool that just bypasses physical labor.
That's a great way to put it.
You get all the psychological satisfaction of turning a chaotic, messy space into a perfectly ordered space, but without the sweat, the backache, or, the exposure to actual harsh chemicals.
You just hold down a trigger on a piece of plastic in your hands.
Right. But I want to circle back to my opening point, because this is where I start to really get confused. I completely understand why playing the game gives you that sense of control, but the rumor noted that during peak times, 44,000 people were watching a Twitch stream of someone else playing it.
Yes.
What is the psychological utility of watching someone else clean a digital bathroom?
So the author of the Game Tyrant piece touched on this. And it really comes down to cognitive offloading. and what we might call visual ASMR.
Let's pause right there. We hear ASMR thrown around constantly online. Usually it's in the context of those YouTube videos where people like whisper into high fidelity microphones or tap their fingernails on glass.
Dingling video.
Yeah, exactly. What exactly does visual ASMR mean in the context of watching a power washer?
Well, ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. It's typically characterized by a tingling sensation that begins on the scalp and moves down the back of the neck, triggered by specific auditory or visual stimuli.
Okay.
But beyond the physical tingle, it induces a state of deep relaxation and low-frequency brainwaves. When you watch someone else systematically clean a digital object, your brain's pattern recognition centers are being engaged, but with zero stakes and zero required input.
So my brain sees the dirty spot, expects it to be clean, sees the water hit it, and then gets the satisfaction of the clean surface.
Yes, it is a perfect closed loop
No,
of
zajebiście.
problem, action, and immediate resolution. It demands absolutely zero cognitive load from the viewer.
Wow.
Furthermore, the audio design in these games is incredibly intentional.
How so?
The game doesn't assault you with urgent, pulsating battle music. It relies entirely on white noise. The sound of the virtual water actually changes pitch and resonance depending on whether the player is spraying digital metal or wood or plastic.
Oh, I've noticed that. It really does change.
It creates this rhythmic, highly predictable soundscape. So for those 44,000 viewers, they aren't really watching a video game stream in the traditional sense. They are participating in a mass digital meditation session.
That reframes it completely. It's a digital meditation.
Exactly.
But you know, if you take away the threat of failure and you remove all the high adrenaline action, what actually sustains the player, like watching a stream for 30 minutes to fall asleep, makes sense. But these games have players logging 40, 60, sometimes hundreds of hours.
Oh, easily hundreds of hours.
Right. So if it's just a digital chore, how does the developer keep the player from getting completely bored?
Well, that requires us to pivot from the emotional appeal of the game to its underlying mechanical design. Because the developers behind these successful titles are essentially operating as behavioral psychologists.
Really? That's deliberate.
Oh, absolutely. They have distilled the core gameplay loop down to its most potent, frankly, addictive essence.
According to the analysis from the Supersonic blog and our sources, they break this fundamental loop down into 3 very distinct repeating steps. You perform an action, you receive a clear reward, and you use that reward to progress your capabilities.
And that loop is the engine of the entire genre. It operates on the concept of real life, but better.
Real life, but better. I like that.
A good simulator allows the player to ask the question, what if I did this manual labor or ran this business for a living? But it strips away all the friction. You can decide to run a rural gas station without having to take out a crippling small business loan, without dealing with actual supply chain shortages, and without managing payroll taxes.
So they take the fantasy of autonomy, like being your own boss, and they surgically remove the bureaucracy.
Exactly.
And the reward system is fascinating because based on the Game Tyrant breakdown, it hits the player from 2 different psychological angles simultaneously. It uses a dual reward system.
Right, visual and mechanical.
Yeah, first you have the visual environmental improvement. You pick up a piece of virtual trash, and your shop instantly looks cleaner. You paint a wall, and the aesthetic of your environment permanently improves.
And the second half of that dual reward system is mechanical capability.
The upgrades.
The upgrades. The money you earn from that clean shop allows you to buy a better power washer nozzle with a wider spread, or a pneumatic wrench that removes bolts twice as fast. Or in the case of your store games, an automated checkout scanner so you don't have to manually scan groceries anymore.
Right, you're upgrading your ability to do the chores faster so you can earn more money, so you can buy even better upgrades.
It is essentially hacking the brain's dopamine reward center through rapid, reliable microdoses of success.
Microdoses of success.
Because in a real-world job, your reward for hard work is almost always delayed. You wait 2 weeks for a paycheck, you wait a year for a performance review.
Or you never get one at all.
Right. You might work for months on a project that gets completely canceled by upper management, meaning all your effort resulted in zero reward.
That is painfully relatable for a lot of people listening right now, I'm sure.
But in the simulator,
Yeah.
effort is immediately mathematically rewarded. You scan a customer's item, the digital cash register jings, a little green number floats up on the screen, and your progress bar fills by a fraction of a percent.
It's pure validation.
You are receiving continuous, unambiguous validation that your labor has value.
Game Tyrant actually uses a great term for this. They call it guided creativity.
That's a perfect phrase for it.
Because you might look at a game like Minecraft, which is arguably the most popular game of all time, and say, well, Minecraft is relaxing, why not just play that?
Right.
But Minecraft drops you into an infinite blank world. You have to literally mine the stone, smelt the glass, and have the architectural vision to build a house from scratch. For a tired brain, staring at a blank canvas can be deeply intimidating.
It requires way too much raw artistic energy.
Exactly. But guided creativity solves the blank canvas problem. In a simulator, the framework is already pre-built.
The walls are already there.
The walls of your card shop are there, the foundation of your garage is poured. Your job isn't to build the world, your job is to optimize it. You get to decide where the display shelves go or what color to paint the ceiling.
It lowers the cognitive barrier to entry drastically, while still allowing the player to feel a really profound sense of ownership.
Right, you still look at the screen and think, this is my store, even though the game held your hand through 90% of the construction process.
Yeah.
Now, I'm looking at all of these mechanics. You know, the satisfying sound effects, the immediate visual transformation of cleaning something, the constant progression bars, and I have to make an observation about the modern internet.
What's that?
These games seem like they were engineered in a subterranean laboratory specifically to go viral on TikTok and YouTube Shorts.
Oh, absolutely. They're perfectly optimized for it.
The entire gameplay loop naturally generates incredibly satisfying before and after moments. A creator can show a rusted out, decrepit muscle car, do a quick jump cut, and suddenly it's this pristine, cherry red masterpiece with a roaring engine. These games feel custom built to manipulate the short form social media algorithm.
That is a very, very accurate reading of the market dynamics right now.
Okay.
Social media algorithms heavily prioritize high retention, visually legible transformations.
Visually legible, meaning you don't need context to understand it.
Right. If a viewer scrolling on their phone can instantly understand the problem, the car is broken, and see the resolution within 15 seconds, they will watch the video to the very end.
Which the algorithm loves.
Simulator games provide an infinite, procedurally generated stream of exactly that type of content. The virality on platforms like TikTok drives massive spikes in player acquisition, and those new players then go on to generate more viral clips.
It's a self-sustaining marketing loop.
It is.
But the sources from the Reddit communities reveal something even more interesting to me. This desire for a low-pressure, highly rewarding, zero-stakes loop. It's so overwhelmingly strong that it isn't just driving sales of simulator games, it's actually causing a behavioral shift in entirely different genres.
This is one of my favorite data points. Players are actively trying to strip the stress out of games that were explicitly, mathematically designed to be stressful.
Right. Which brings us to the fascinating subculture of the cozy gamers, specifically within the context of what is known as the colony sim genre.
Let's clarify what a colony sim is for the listener, because it's fundamentally different from a traditional city builder.
Good point. If you play a classic city builder, like SimCity or Cities, Skylines, your population of 1 million people is just an abstract mathematical metric. You build a fire station, a spreadsheet updates, and your overall city safety rating goes up by 3%.
It's a macro simulation.
Exactly. But a colony sim is micro-focused.
Yeah.
Every single non-player character or NPC is a fully realized digital individual. They have a specific name, a specific job, personality traits, physical locations, and even complex relationships with other digital characters.
And historically, the roots of the colony sim genre are notoriously, almost sadistically brutal.
Oh, they are unforgiving.
The early pioneers of this genre were built on punishing simulations of survival. Take a game like Banished, for example.
Oh, man.
If you miscalculate your village's firewood production or fail to harvest crops before the first snow, you don't just get a low score or a game over screen. You have to sit there and watch as 75% of your individually named villagers slowly freeze or starve to death over the winter.
It's bleak. Or a game like Kenshi, where the world is entirely indifferent to you, and your starting character might literally be enslaved or eaten by a roaming cannibal war party within the first 10 minutes.
And of course, the granddaddy of them all, Dwarf Fortress.
We have to talk about Dwarf Fortress.
This is a game where the simulation is so deep that a digital cat can walk through a digital tavern, step in spilled digital beer, clean its paws, ingest the alcohol, and die of alcohol poisoning.
I still can't believe that's a real mechanic in a game.
It is. The unofficial motto of the Dwarf Fortress community is literally, losing is fun. The game is fundamentally designed to generate complex, cascading failures.
So these games are built from the ground up to generate anxiety and disaster.
Yes.
But the cozy gamers community on Reddit is taking these incredibly complex, intricately simulated worlds, and they are essentially performing a pacifist rebellion.
That's a great term for it.
They are saying, look, we love the depth of the mechanics, we love the individual villagers, but we absolutely refuse to engage with the anxiety.
Right, so they take a game like RimWorld, which normally features alien raids and devastating plagues, and they intentionally set the difficulty to peaceful mode.
They just turn the threats off entirely.
They turn off the violence,
Yeah.
they disable the extreme weather events, and they completely neuter the intended threats of the game.
It's a profound shift in the player fantasy. Because for decades, the fantasy of gaming was overcoming adversity, right? You fight the dragon, you survive the harsh winter.
That was always the goal.
But this demographic is actively rejecting the four horsemen of the apocalypse. They do not want famine, war, pestilence, or death in their leisure time.
Not at all.
By turning on peaceful mode, they transform a grueling survival simulator into a deeply intricate sociological sandbox.
It's like they want a version of The Sims, but with incredibly complex supply chains and community building. Their goal isn't to survive, their goal is to help their digital villagers achieve self-actualization.
They want to watch these little pixelated people find a partner, build a nice house, and maybe open a bakery.
Which really requires us to ask what the function of a hobby actually is in 2026.
What do you mean?
Well, if you think about renting a tense, high-stakes action movie, the appeal is the thrill of the conflict. Playing a survival game on peaceful mode is the equivalent of renting that action movie. But fast-forwarding through all the gunfights and explosions just to watch the scenes where the characters are enjoying a quiet, mundane dinner together.
That is wild to think about. It really is.
But I would pose this to the listener. Examine your own leisure habits. We often categorize our hobbies as either skill building like learning an instrument or thrill seeking. But how much of your actual free time is actively, purposefully dedicated to constructing a zero-stakes sanctuary?
A sanctuary.
A place where you cannot be judged, where you cannot fail, and where the outside world cannot intrude. These cozy gamers aren't playing the game wrong. They are utilizing the software to fulfill a specific psychological deficit created by modern life.
Okay, so we understand the mechanical loops. We understand that these games offer a frictionless sanctuary. But this begs a massive question. Who exactly is playing these games?
Right, the demographics.
Because with billions of gamers worldwide, we need to know if dedicating 40 hours a week to scanning virtual groceries is actually a healthy way to decompress, or if we are just looking at a new, highly normalized form of digital addiction. Like, are we just masking burnout with more work?
For that, we really have to dive deep into the data provided by the 2026 study from psychiatrist.com. And the researchers approached this by first establishing the sheer, undeniable scale of the medium.
How big are we talking?
We are talking about 3.3 billion people globally who play video games in some capacity. That is roughly 83% of the global population.
That is staggering.
Video games are no longer a subculture. They are the dominant mode of interactive human entertainment.
And to figure out why 3.3 billion people are doing this, the researchers applied something called the self-determination theory, or SDT. Let's break that down because reading through the sources, this feels like the Rosetta Stone for understanding all of this.
It really is. Self-determination theory is a macro theory of human motivation. It was developed in the 1980s by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. And it essentially states that human beings are driven by a need to fulfill three core innate psychological needs.
Okay, what are the three?
The first is autonomy. This is the feeling that you have control over your own choices and actions rather than being micromanaged or forced by external pressures.
Autonomy, got it.
The second is competence. This is the need to feel effective, to master skills, and to see tangible results from your efforts.
Okay, competence. And the third?
The third is relatedness. The desire to feel connected to others, to care for and be cared for by a community.
If we map that onto real life, it's honestly pretty easy to see why so many people feel unfulfilled. Because in a modern corporate job, you rarely have true autonomy. Your boss tells you what to do, right?
Exactly.
You might lack competence if your job is highly abstracted, like just moving data around a spreadsheet where you never see a physical end product.
Right, you're alienated from the results of your labor.
Yeah, and relatedness can be completely strained by remote work or, toxic transactional office politics.
Precisely. So the researchers applied SDT to gaming to see how different players use digital worlds to fulfill those missing needs. And based on their behavioral patterns, the study identified 4 specific profiles of modern gamers.
Let's walk through them because this is fascinating. The largest group, making up 38% of the gaming population, are classified as the engaged.
The engaged player is essentially the baseline for a healthy relationship with gaming. These individuals are emotionally balanced in their daily lives. They play games purely for fun, for creative exploration, or for the challenge.
So they aren't using it as a crutch.
No, their real-world needs for autonomy and competence are generally already met. So they use games to supplement or stretch those needs, not to replace them. They can play a simulator for a few hours, feel totally satisfied with the garage they built, and then easily turn the machine off and go interact with their physical life.
Okay, so that's the healthy baseline. Then we have the second group, the relational, who make up 26%.
Right, and as the name implies, the relational gamer is primarily seeking that third pillar of SDT, relatedness.
Connection.
They thrive on the social connections, the teamwork, and the status within a gaming community. They tend to log a very high number of hours, mostly in multiplayer environments.
And what's the risk factor there?
The risk factor is that they sometimes use these digital relationships to entirely replace offline social interaction, which can eventually lead to isolation from their physical community.
Okay, makes sense. Now, the third group is where things start to get really counterintuitive. The avoidant profile, which makes up 20% of players. These are solo players.
Highly solo.
They actively avoid multiplayer, they don't want competition, and they are purely looking for escapism and fantasy. You would think, based on the word avoidant, that these people are the most addicted to escaping reality.
You would think so.
But this study found the exact opposite.
This is a major revelation in the study. The avoidant profile actually logs the fewest average hours played, and they have the absolute lowest risk of developing a gaming disorder.
How does that make sense, though? If you are playing to avoid reality, shouldn't you be playing all the time?
It comes down to the way they avoid it. The avoidant player uses the game as a temporary controlled retreat. They know the real world is stressful, so they consciously step into a digital sanctuary, like a cozy farming simulator, to specifically lower their heart rate and decompress.
Oh, I see.
They aren't running away from their problems indefinitely. They're just taking a psychological breather in a quiet corner. And once their battery is recharged, they log off.
Which brings us to the final and really the most concerning group, the dysregulated, making up 16% of the population.
This is the most vulnerable demographic by far. The dysregulated player struggles significantly with impulsivity and emotional regulation in their offline life.
So when things go wrong,
When they face real-world responsibilities, conflicts, or negative emotions, they simply do not have the coping mechanisms to process them. So they play games specifically to suppress and ignore those negative feelings.
so it's a suppression tactic.
Because the gaming is a compulsive mechanism for emotional suppression rather than a conscious choice for relaxation, this group exhibits the highest risk of true clinical addiction.
You know, this data completely shatters the old school mainstream narrative about video game addiction. Because for decades, the media and concerned parents have focused almost entirely on the stopwatch.
Oh, completely. It's always about the hour.
Right, like, you played for 5 hours today, you must be addicted. But this study explicitly states that time spent gaming alone is not a reliable indicator of addiction.
It is a critical distinction between high engagement and pathology.
Okay, break that down.
If you spend 8 hours on a Saturday, deeply engrossed in designing a complex, perfectly optimized digital factory, because you find the problem solving intellectually stimulating, that is high engagement.
Obviously.
It's no different than spending 8 hours building a model airplane or reading a massive novel.
Right.
However, if you play for only 2 hours on a Tuesday, but you are doing it specifically to avoid opening an email from your boss or to numb the anxiety of an argument you just had,
That's the warning sign.
that is a glaring warning sign of emotional dysregulation. It is the function of the play, not the duration, that matters.
So, looking at these 4 profiles and looking at the specific mechanics of simulator games, the repetitive chores, the lack of combat, the quiet isolation, I really have to ask, these simulator games act as a magnet for the avoidant and the engaged profiles.
They certainly appeal heavily to them, yes.
And furthermore, if someone is in that vulnerable 16%, the dysregulated group, is a simulator actually the safest possible genre for their mental health?
In terms of game design ethics, simulators are inherently much safer.
Why is that?
Well, a dysregulated player might still use a simulator to compulsively avoid their real-world problems, yes. But we have to look at what the game is doing back to them. Many modern, highly profitable games, specifically competitive shooters or live service games, are designed to actively manipulate the player's psychology.
Oh, the monetization schemes.
Yes, they use predatory mechanics like fear of missing out, limited time battle passes, and randomized loot boxes that act exactly like slot machines to artificially ramp up anxiety and monetize impulsivity.
So they engineer stress to force engagement.
Exactly. Simulators, by and large, lack those toxic hooks. There are no screaming teenagers in a voice chat. There's no daily login penalty if you miss a day of cleaning your virtual power wash business.
It won't penalize you for not playing.
Right. The simulator reliably provides the autonomy and competence pillars of the self-determination theory without weaponizing the player's anxiety. So yes, for a vulnerable player, it is a vastly less harmful environment to retreat into.
Okay, up to this point, we have been exploring simulators purely as an escape from reality.
Kurwa.
Framed them as coping mechanisms, digital sanctuaries, psychological tools to manage modern burnout,
Which they are.
which they are. But here is where this deep dive takes a massive pivot, because the sources reveal something I honestly did not expect.
The vocational applications.
Yes, the exact same video game mechanics that are being used to help people escape the real world are now being weaponized to train people for the real world.
This is where simulation crosses the boundary from mere entertainment into a true revolution in vocational pedagogy.
We have a fascinating 2026 academic study from the Journal of Leadership and Quality in Education. The researchers conducted this study at a vocational college in central Vietnam, specifically focusing on their automotive technology program.
Right.
And what they did was develop a custom WebGL 3D interactive simulator to teach novice students how to assemble and disassemble complex automobile chassis systems.
Now, before we look at the software, we really need to understand the physical bottlenecks of traditional trade education.
Right. Anyone who has ever taken a high school shop class, or even just walked into a mechanic's garage, understands the traditional barriers here. First of all, physical car chassis models are massive.
They take up a huge footprint.
They take up a tremendous amount of premium garage space. They are incredibly expensive to purchase for a school and equally expensive to maintain when students inevitably break the parts.
Which they will.
Oh, constantly. Furthermore, for a complete novice, taking apart an engine block can be genuinely dangerous.
Heavy machinery, sharp edges, compressed springs.
Yes. And beyond the logistics and the safety, there is a fundamental teaching limitation with physical objects.
This is the key part. A solid, static metal engine block cannot show you internal dynamic kinematic movements.
Stop right there. Kinematic movements. What does that mean in plain English?
Right, sorry. Kinematics is the study of motion without considering the forces that cause the motion. In a car engine, it means understanding exactly how a piston drives a crankshaft, how the gears mesh together, and how the timing belt coordinates the entire symphony of moving parts.
Okay, I can visualize that.
But if you are staring at a solid steel engine block on a table, you cannot see inside of it. You cannot see the kinematics in action. You have to imagine it based on a 2D diagram in a textbook.
Which is really hard for a lot of people to translate in their heads.
Incredibly hard.
So to solve this, the researchers in Vietnam brought in video game mechanics. They built a 3D simulation that runs on WebGL. And for the listener, WebGL just means it's a graphics API that runs directly in a web browser.
No special hardware required.
Exactly. The students didn't need high-end gaming PCs or VR headsets. They just opened a web page on a standard laptop and had access to a fully rendered 3D car. And the interface they built mirrors exactly what you would see if you were playing a commercial hit like Car Mechanic Simulator.
The mechanics are virtually identical. The simulator features 360-degree free camera rotation, allowing the student to inspect the digital car from literally any angle. And they utilized a core gaming UI mechanic known as raycasting selection.
Oh, I know raycasting. It's that incredibly satisfying mechanic where you move your computer mouse over a complex 3D object, and the specific part you are hovering over instantly gets a bright golden highlight.
Exactly.
It's such a simple visual trick, but it instantly communicates to your brain like, this object is interactive, I can manipulate this specific bolt and not the one next to it.
That golden highlight eliminates all the guesswork. And the students could also use layered disassembly. Because the car is digital, they could click a button and completely turn off the rendering of the car's exterior body panels. leaving just the internal frame.
Just stripping it down instantly.
Then they could hide the engine block casing to expose just the pistons.
That is so useful.
Furthermore, the researchers integrated multimedia pop-up videos right into the 3D interface. So when a student clicked on a digital alternator, a video would appear showing that exact real-world alternator functioning in a live car.
The feedback from the students and the teachers in this study was overwhelmingly, unanimously positive. The students reported that they loved being able to essentially peel away the physical layers of reality.
Which you just can't do in real life.
No. They felt the digital environment was cleaner and safer, which significantly lowered their baseline anxiety about making a catastrophic, expensive mistake.
Right, because if you break the digital engine, you just hit reset.
Exactly. The teachers noted that the classroom engagement skyrocketed because the students were integrating theoretical textbook knowledge with hands-on digital practice simultaneously. But I really want to know the science behind why this is so much more effective than just giving a kid a wrench in a diagram.
Well, the researchers attribute the success of this simulator to a framework known as the 4CID pedagogical model, combined heavily with Mayer's multimedia learning principles.
Okay, I'm going to need you to translate both of those academic terms into something I can actually visualize. Because 4CID sounds like a droid from Star Wars. What is it, and how does it apply to clicking on a digital car?
Right, 4CID stands for Four-Component Instructional Design. It was developed in the late 90s, specifically to teach complex cognitive skills.
Okay.
The four components are learning tasks, which is the actual problem to solve, supportive information, the theory of how things work, procedural information, the step-by-step rules, and part task practice, drilling specific repetitive skills.
Okay, so how did the simulator actually utilize that?
By using what educators call constructivism.
Constructivism.
Traditional education often relies on passive absorption, right? A teacher lectures, you listen. Constructivism argues that learners actively construct their own knowledge through direct interaction with their environment. The simulator forces the student to perform the part task practice. You don't just read about removing a tire, you physically click the lug nuts in the correct star pattern to remove the digital tire.
Ah, so you're building the habit digitally. And what about Mayer's principles?
Richard Mayer is an educational psychologist who developed 12 principles for how people learn from multimedia. The simulator leverages several of them brilliantly.
Give me an example.
For example, the spatial contiguity principle states that people learn better when corresponding words and pictures are presented close to each other on screen. By putting the pop-up video of the real alternator right next to the 3D digital alternator, the brain doesn't have to work to connect them.
It's right there.
But the most important principle at play here is cognitive load management.
Cognitive load being the amount of mental RAM your brain is using at any given second.
Exactly. A real physical car engine has an incredibly high intrinsic cognitive load. There are hundreds of wires, bolts, and hoses. It is visually overwhelming to look at.
Yeah, you open the hood and just sigh.
By allowing the student to use layered disassembly, hiding the wires, hiding the hoses, looking only at the transmission, the software artificially lowers the cognitive load. The student's brain can isolate and understand one system perfectly before adding the noise of the other systems back in.
Which perfectly mirrors the dopamine loops of action, reward, and progression we discussed earlier in the entertainment simulators.
It's the exact same psychological hook, just applied to education.
I hear all of this. The science makes sense, the cognitive load theory is totally sound, but I have to push back hard on this transition from digital to physical.
Go on.
Because turning a smooth plastic computer mouse on a desk and hearing a satisfying little click sound that is fundamentally biologically different from holding a greasy, heavy 30-pound wrench and trying to break free a rusted, stubborn bolt in a freezing garage while your knuckles literally bleed.
Oh, absolutely.
So can clicking a mouse in a web browser really replace the raw physical muscle memory required for trade school?
That is the most common critique of digital vocational training. And the Vietnam study actually addresses it directly.
What do they say?
The goal of the 3D simulator is not, and never will be, to replace physical muscle memory. You cannot learn how much torque is required to break a rusted bolt by clicking a mouse.
So what is the point then if they still have to learn the physical feel anyway?
Because the simulator replaces the conceptual bottleneck.
Conceptual bottleneck.
Think about a novice in a physical shop. Very often, a student freezes up and fails to perform a task not because they lack the physical strength to turn the wrench, but because they lack the mental map.
They don't know what they're looking at.
They are terrified. that removing this specific bolt will cause a spring to fly out and hit them in the eye, or they simply do not conceptually understand how the part they are holding interacts with the part behind it.
So they're paralyzed by the fear of the unknown.
Exactly. The simulator builds a flawless, risk-free mental map. Once the student has disassembled the digital engine 10 times, they know the exact architecture of the machine. When they finally walk into the physical garage and pick up that heavy, greasy wrench, the cognitive fear is entirely gone. They only have to focus on the physical execution. The simulator bridges the gap between abstract textbook theory and psychomotor practice, making the time spent in the physical shop vastly faster, safer, and less stressful.
That is a phenomenal distinction. You cure the mental paralysis first, so the physical body is free to work. And because these simulator mechanics have hit this absolute sweet spot, providing deep psychological satisfaction on the entertainment side and undeniable practical utility on the educational side, the genre has absolutely exploded in the market this year, in 2026.
It has.
But according to our industry sources, this gold rush is happening for better and for worse.
Let's look at the hard market data from the No Wave Journal and the analysts at Game Tyrant, because the financial growth of this sector is staggering. In 2026 alone, the simulation genre revenue hit $1.2 billion.
Billion with a B.
With a B. But the more telling metric is player intent. At one point this year, simulator games captured 78% of the entire wishlist market share on the Steam platform.
Wait, 78%. The Steam platform has tens of thousands of games ranging from massive AAA shooters to sprawling role-playing epics, and you're telling me that almost 8 out of every 10 games that players were looking at and saying, I want to buy this in the future, were simulators.
It is total market dominance, and you can really trace the rapid evolution of the genre's complexity by looking at its heavyweight champion, the Car Mechanic Simulator franchise.
Right. If you look back at Car Mechanic Simulator 2018, which was a huge hit, it was a very isolated, almost monastic experience.
Very quiet.
Yeah. The mechanics were fantastic. You had highly realistic tire balancers, deeply detailed
Dobra,
engine
to plan jest
breakdowns,
taki.
but you were
Najpierw
basically
zdobyć
alone
bebechy,
in a
bez których
silent
kaszlak nie
garage,
ruszy.
turning
Opcjonalne części jak hamulce to zbędne luksusy.
digital wrenches for 50 hours.
But the developers recognized that even a perfectly designed chore eventually causes player burnout. You can only do so many digital oil changes before the dopamine loop flattens out entirely.
Right, gets stale.
So with the newly released Car Mechanic Simulator 2026, they evolved the fundamental structure. They added full co-op multiplayer, allowing you to run a chaotic workshop with your friends, which addresses that need for relatedness we talked about earlier.
Oh, that's smart.
More importantly, they added massive, complex business empire building layers. The game is no longer just about the micro task of fixing the car. It is about managing the macro economy of a growing franchise.
So they took the autonomy and competence of fixing the car and wrapped it in the autonomy and competence of being a CEO.
Exactly.
And other titles in 2026 are pushing the boundaries of realism in insane ways too.
Oh, definitely.
You have a game like Wreckfest 2, which is ostensibly a demolition derby racing game, but it incorporates post-race mechanic repairs using damage physics that are mapped to be 95% accurate to real-world crash data.
That level of detail is amazing.
It is. And then you have indie titles like low-budget repairs, which completely subverts the pristine fantasy by leaning into a gritty, desperate aesthetic. You are actively scavenging junkyards for janky, rusted parts just to make barely functional fixes on terrible cars.
It is a period of incredible innovation for the genre. But as with any multi-billion-dollar gold rush, there is a severe dark side.
There always is.
The analysts at Game Tyrants have termed this the oversaturation problem.
Right, because whenever a specific, identifiable genre becomes highly profitable and naturally viral on platforms like TikTok, the market responds with a flood of low-quality imitators.
Inevitably.
Unscrupulous developers realize that simply appending the word simulator to the end of literally any noun is a cheap, highly effective marketing buzzword that almost guarantees search engine traffic and algorithmic visibility.
It leads to what the gaming industry calls a flood of asset flips and shovelware.
Let's define those terms for the listener, because it's important to understand how the digital economy actually functions behind the curtain. How does an asset flip actually happen mechanically?
Well, the modern development ecosystem relies heavily on digital storefronts, like the Unity Asset Store or the Unreal Engine Marketplace.
Okay.
These are platforms where legitimate artists sell pre-made 3D models, sound effects, and even basic code templates to help indie developers save time. A developer can legally buy a pre-made supermarket pack containing 3D shelves, cash registers, and grocery items for $50.
So the developer buys the $50 pack, and then what?
In an asset flip, a cynical developer buys that pack, uses a generic code template to slap the objects into an empty room, does zero optimization, writes zero original code, and publishes it on Steam 3 days later under a title like Supermarket Cashier Simulator 3D Pro.
Oh, wow.
They price it at $4, hoping to catch the algorithmic wave of players searching for the genuine, lovingly crafted supermarket simulator. They are flipping pre-made assets for a quick, low-effort buck. That is the definition of shovelware software, just shoveled onto the market with zero regard for quality.
And it completely dilutes the genre. I mean, if the Steam store is choked with thousands of these asset flips, it creates a massive crisis of discoverability.
It's a huge problem for real developers.
Right, it becomes incredibly hard for players to find the true, passionate indie developers who spent 3 years building a deeply intricate game because their work is just buried under an avalanche of cynical cash grabs. I have to wonder, if slapping simulator on a title guarantees at least a few hundred sales from confused buyers, where's the bottom of the barrel?
I don't know if there is one.
Are we going to see filing taxes 2026 simulator or waiting in line at the DMV simulator?
The irony of modern internet culture is that someone has almost certainly already made those as a satirical joke.
You're probably right.
But to your broader point about the market sustaining itself, there is a natural psychological defense mechanism against shovelware.
What's that?
A game only truly works, and a game only sustains an active player base if it successfully taps into the self-determination theory we spent so much time discussing.
The autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Exactly. If a developer makes a joke DMV simulator, but it doesn't offer any genuine feeling of autonomy or any meaningful mechanics to build competence, the gimmick wears off in exactly 10 minutes.
Because it's not actually satisfying.
Right. The player realizes they're just clicking a button, the dopamine loop fails to engage, and they utilize Steam's refund policy. The buzzword gets the player in the door, but only solid, respectful, psychologically sound game design keeps them in the room.
That makes a lot of sense.
The asset flips will always exist, but they cannot hold the cultural attention.
So let's pull all of these threads together and briefly recap this incredible journey we've been on today. We started by exploring how simulator games provide a deeply needed, almost medicinal sense of control in a fundamentally chaotic and tropic real world.
A shelter from the storm.
We broke down how their mechanical loops of action, reward, and progress deliver highly satisfying microdoses of success, completely stripping away the threat of failure and real-world bureaucracy. We looked at the psychology of the 3.3 billion gamers globally, seeing how these digital sanctuaries cater to different psychological profiles.
Specifically offering a safe haven for the avoidant and the engaged without exploiting the dysregulated.
Yes. And incredibly, we saw how this exact framework of lowering cognitive load and building conceptual mastery is actively revolutionizing real-world vocational education for the next generation of tradespeople.
It is a profound testament to how digital environments, when designed with intention and respect for the player's time, can positively interact with human psychology.
But before we let you go, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought. Something to mull over on your own as you navigate both your physical and digital lives, building on everything we've discussed today.
I'm curious what this is.
If our digital lives are becoming perfectly structured by behavioral psychologists to provide clear goals, steady progression, and immediate mathematically guaranteed rewards for our efforts, will this eventually permanently change our expectations for the real world?
That is the ultimate sociological question.
Because as entire generations grow up finding deep, profound psychological fulfillment in the balanced, fair, and perfectly logical economies of simulator games, will they eventually refuse to accept the friction of reality?
It's possible.
Will they demand that our real-world jobs, our educational institutions, and our societies be redesigned to function just as fairly and rewardingly as the games they play to escape them?
If the virtual world consistently proves to us that labor can be structured to be deeply satisfying, meaningful, and free of unnecessary bureaucracy, it inevitably sets a new benchmark for reality. It proves that the misery of a modern job isn't a law of nature, it's just bad design.
We want to thank you for joining us on today's deep dive. Hopefully, the next time you are faced with a mundane chore, whether it's washing the car in the driveway, cleaning the gutters, or finally organizing the chaotic mess on your desk, you won't just view it as another burden of entropy.
Right, there's satisfaction to be found there.
Exactly. Maybe you'll view it as a chance to find a little bit of order, a little bit of competence, and a chance to level up in real life. Because after all, usually when we talk about video games, there is this overwhelming expectation of adrenaline and violence. But perhaps the most powerful, radical thing a digital world can offer us today isn't a racing heart, but a quiet, perfectly clean room where everything makes sense.
And you are purposefully letting this false sun just wash over you, evaporating yourself and your entire family. Desert. The blinding... Imagine walking out into the blinding, white-hot heat of a nuclear blast.
Okay, setting a pretty intense scene right out of the gate.
I mean, you have to picture it. You are standing in the Alamogordo Desert, right at the exact moment the Trinity atomic bomb detonates.
Right.
And you are purposefully letting this false sun just wash over you, evaporating yourself and your entire family.
Which sounds completely insane.
Totally insane. But you're doing it all to force the human race to finally grow up.
Yeah.
And that isn't some fever dream or a lost sci-fi novel. That was the actual planned ending to one of the most intricately designed television shows ever created.
A show that famously was abruptly killed before it could even reach its halfway point.
Exactly. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are looking at the sprawling, chaotic, and, often unfinished mythologies of serialized television.
We have a genuinely fascinating stack of sources for you today.
We really do. We are pulling from deep dive analytical pieces on Screen Rant and a deeply passionate and painstakingly translated forum post from a Polish television community.
FilmWeb, I believe.
Yes, FilmWeb, plus archival cast and crew data from TV Guide. And then the absolute holy grail for television nerds.
Oh, this is the best part.
A leaked massive pitch document and archived Reddit AMA posts from Daniel Nauf. He's the creator of the cult classic HBO series, Carnival.
So much incredible material in there.
Right. So we are going to explore the anatomy of these shows. Like, how do they build their mythologies? What actually happens behind the scenes when the harsh, cold realities of network television clash with grand, sweeping artistic visions?
Things like writers' strikes and syndication roles.
Exactly. And perhaps most intriguingly, what happens when a creator builds a universe so deep, so historically textured, that the real world simply cannot contain it. So yeah, let's unpack this.
Well, the mechanics of how a mythology is built and how it is broken is just one of the most fascinating intersections of art, commerce, and human psychology.
Oh, absolutely.
But before we can truly understand a magnificent failure or an unfinished masterpiece, we need to understand the architectural foundation of the supernatural genre itself.
The blueprint, basically.
Right, we have to look at the blueprint and then look at the house that was built on top of it.
Which means we need to compare two absolute titans of the genre. I'm talking about The X-Files and its direct spiritual successor, Fringe.
Two incredibly important shows.
They really are. And they share so much conceptual DNA. You have the FBI, fringe science, overarching government conspiracies.
The skeptic paired with a believer.
Right, the classic dynamic. But structurally, they are beasts from two entirely different eras of television.
Looking at this breakdown from Screen Rant by Anthony Fertino, it is illuminating to see exactly where Fringe perfected the formula and where the X-Files still holds the crown.
Yeah, and I want to start with where Fringe undeniably won the battle, which is storytelling structure.
Well, to understand the structure of the X-Files, we have to look at the economic reality of television in the early 1990s.
It was a completely different landscape.
It really was. When that show premiered, television was fundamentally an episodic medium driven entirely by the demands of syndication.
Right, because streaming didn't exist. You couldn't just binge it.
Exactly. Networks needed packages of episodes that local stations could air at, say, 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, completely out of order.
So you couldn't confuse a casual viewer who just happened to tune in.
Right. Because of that financial model, The X-Files was forced to rely heavily on the Monster of the Week format.
which people loved, but it had drawbacks.
The writers would drop these microscopic breadcrumbs for the overarching alien conspiracy plot, but the pace was just agonizingly slow because the business model forbade them from moving too fast.
It was glacial. I mean, you could easily go 5 or 6 episodes without a single mention of the Syndicate or the Black Oil.
And that episodic reset meant the characters were constantly hitting a reset button on their own development.
Oh man, that is so true. Mulder and Scully had arguably the greatest chemistry in television history.
Unmatched chemistry.
But as the article points out, their arcs were adamantly stagnant. Like, Scully could witness a literal liver-eating mutant squeezing through an air vent in week 3.
The Tombs episode.
Yeah, Tombs. And by week 4, she was back to being the hardened skeptic demanding empirical proof. The format demanded they never fundamentally change.
But Fringe was birthed in a different era.
Totally. Fringe adapted to modern viewing habits.
While its first season leaned a bit episodic as it found its footing, the writers quickly stepped on the gas.
They really did. From season 2 onward, largely influenced by creators like J.J. Abrams who championed serialization, every single episode mattered.
They didn't leave the audience hanging for 7 years with shifting motivations. They treated each season like a distinct, complete narrative volume.
They wrapped up their villains succinctly, and that allowed the characters to actually evolve.
Right, it allowed for real emotional progression.
I mean, Fringe basically played out like a family drama that was just wearing a sci-fi trench coat. You know,
That's a great way to put it.
you have Walter Bishop confronting the horrific, world-breaking sins of his past. You have his son, Peter, slowly learning to forgive him.
And Olivia Dunham overcoming her trauma to learn how to trust again. They grew.
And on a purely technical level, Fringe just had vastly superior action.
The production value was much higher.
There's this hilarious detail in the Screen Rant piece where the author points out that someone needs to tally how many times Fox Mulder gets hit in the back of the head.
It is a massive running trope.
It's ridiculous. The action blocking in the X-Files feels very stiff and dated now, whereas Fringe delivered feature film quality shootouts.
Well, they had the benefit of modern studio money and a shift in how television action was produced.
But we cannot ignore the specific arenas where the X-Files remains entirely unmatched.
Because the modern polish of Fringe came at a cost. What the X-Files mastered, which Fringe never quite grasped, was the innate texture of horror and dread.
Oh, the atmosphere, the pacing of the X-Files was just so deliberate.
The darkness, the literal physical fog in those Vancouver shooting locations.
It made the show terrifying on a visceral level. Fringe had gross out moments, absolutely. The article notes the pilot of Fringe opens with people rotting to pieces on a commercial flight.
Yeah, they had mutant insects and things like that.
But it always felt more like a mysterious biological puzzle than something that would keep you awake at night.
The X-Files understood that horror isn't just about the visual effect, it is about the sustained dread leading up to the reveal.
Yes, the anticipation.
And surprisingly, alongside that dread, the X-Files was vastly superior at satire. It was deeply self-aware.
They wore their societal commentary so incredibly well, they reflected the real-world flaws of shadowy government bureaucracy.
But then they would pivot and do these wildly wacky meta episodes.
I immediately think of the episode where Mulder and Scully go to Hollywood to watch a movie being made about themselves.
Oh, Hollywood AD.
Yeah, which was very Scream 2 in its self-awareness. Or Bad Blood with Luke Wilson.
An absolute classic.
They take the same event and show it first through Mulder's point of view, where Scully is this nagging, dismissive partner.
And then through Scully's point of view, where Mulder is this unhinged, manic weirdo.
It showed a writer's room that deeply understood the elasticity of their own characters.
When Fringe tried to do that, like their Brown Betty Noir musical episode, it felt incredibly forced.
Yeah, it took itself way too seriously.
It lacked that specific tonal agility. And finally, the X-Files won the world-building and franchising war completely.
Oh, no contest.
They introduced side characters like the Lone Gunman, Doggett, Reyes, characters that made the universe feel incredibly lived in.
They expanded into blockbuster movies, comic books, and even a Cold Cases audiobook using the original actors.
Fringe simply did not leave that kind of cultural footprint.
I was thinking about this while reading the breakdown, and it brought a specific analogy to mind.
Oh, let's hear it.
To me, the X-Files is like this beautifully decorated, incredibly intricate haunted house. You can wander around inside it for hours, looking at the creepy wallpaper, admiring the antique furniture.
Getting spooked by the shadows.
Exactly. You aren't necessarily going anywhere, but the vibes are immaculate. Fringe, on the other hand, is a roller coaster
Once you are strapped in, the narrative engine propels you forward.
on a very specific track, and it does not stop until you hit the finish line.
That is a highly accurate framework for how those narrative engines operate.
But I have to push back a bit on the franchising argument. Is the lack of franchising for Fringe really a failure of the show itself?
That's a fair question.
Or was it just a victim of terrible timing? Think about when it aired. It was competing for attention in a landscape that was suddenly dominated by the birth of peak TV.
Right, the golden age of prestige cable.
Shows like Breaking Bad and Mad Men were sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Did Fringe just get lost in the shuffle of a fragmenting audience?
If we connect this to the broader history of the medium, it is absolutely a mix of both. You are right that the landscape changed.
It was a tough time to be a network sci-fi show.
Modern television viewers, the ones who grew up during the DVD box set era and the dawn of streaming demand, the tight serialization that Fringe provided. But we have to acknowledge that The X-Files was the plow that cleared the field. It trained the mainstream audience to accept the supernatural genre in a primetime slot in the first place.
That's a really good point.
The X-Files was a cultural phenomenon in a monoculture era with far fewer channels. By the time Fringe aired, the audience was already fragmenting.
So while Fringe perfected the narrative engine, the X-Files owned the cultural real estate.
Exactly.
That makes total sense. And in the grand scheme of things, Fringe is actually a rare, massive success story in one very specific way.
It got its 5th season.
You got its 5th season. It was allowed to write a definitive ending, a love letter to the fans, and close the book on its own terms.
Which is incredibly rare.
But what happens when the network pulls the plug early? What happens to the mythology when the money dries up before the story is finished?
That is a much darker conversation.
Let's look at the casualties of network television, specifically Heroes and the 4400.
This is where the sheer business mechanics of television really begin to break the hearts of the audience.
Utterly break them. I found this incredibly passionate translated post from a Polish film forum called FilmWeb.
The one you mentioned earlier.
Right. A user there was rewatching Heroes years later, and their breakdown of the show's trajectory is the perfect encapsulation of a fan watching a mythology collapse in real time.
It's a painful read.
They describe watching season 1 of Heroes as magical. And it really was. The premise wasn't about billionaires building iron suits.
It was about totally ordinary people discovering extraordinary abilities.
And the show captured it with the genuine awe of a child.
It was deeply grounded in human reaction. You had a high school cheerleader realizing she couldn't get hurt.
Save the cheerleader, save the world.
Exactly. Or a mundane office worker in Tokyo realizing he could bend the space-time continuum. The magic was in the discovery, not just the application of the powers.
But then the real world slammed into the writer's room. Season 2 of Heroes was completely disrupted by the 2007 Writers Guild of America strike.
And we have to examine how a strike mechanically destroys a serialized narrative.
Please do, because I think people forget how brutal that was.
Well, a writer's room structures a 22-episode season mathematically. They know exactly when a character will face a setback, when a villain will reveal their motive, and when the climax will hit.
It's all plotted out on a giant whiteboard.
Right. When the strike happened, the season was slashed to only 11 episodes.
Cut right in half.
The writers were forced to abruptly compress character arcs, drop vital subplots, and rush the pacing. The narrative math was broken, and the momentum simply died.
And you could feel it on screen. They tried to recover in season 3, which actually had a really sharp allegorical plot where people with powers were being hunted and treated like terrorists by the government.
But season 4?
Season 4 is the ultimate tragedy. Driven entirely by plummeting ratings, NBC just cut the final 6 episodes of the 4th season.
They just stopped filming.
It ended on episode 19. There wasn't a finale. It was just a hard stop. It left this brilliant, multi-season setup for the primary villain, Sylar, entirely unresolved.
Which is infuriating for a fan.
The Polish forum user describes that final episode not just as a disappointment, but as a literal insult to the viewer, based on the emotional investment the plot had demanded.
I can completely understand that reaction.
Although they do reserve special praise for Jack Coleman's portrayal of Noah Bennett, the man with the horn-rimmed glasses.
A fantastic character.
The user calls his character the anchor of the show's humanity, and I think that's spot on. Without Noah Bennett, this powerless, morally gray, fiercely protective father, that show would have floated away into pure, untethered comic book absurdity.
Bennett was the tether that kept the mythology grounded, and the structural tragedy of Heroes is echoed almost perfectly by its thematic sibling from that exact same era.
The USA Network series, the 4400.
Yes, the 4400 is such a fascinating companion piece.
The premise is brilliant. Exactly 4,400 people who had gone missing from various points of the last half century all suddenly return to Earth in a ball of light, completely unaged.
And soon, they start developing abilities.
Precognition, enhanced reflexes, healing. But instead of focusing on them becoming superheroes, the show examines the phenomenon through a deeply bureaucratic lens.
Which ties us right back to the DNA of the X-Files. The 4400 gave us NTAC, the National Threat Assessment Command.
Sounds very spooky government agency.
It is a government agency specifically tasked with tracking, investigating, and essentially policing these returnees. It taps heavily into that post-9/11 paranoia.
Exploring government overreach, surveillance, and the sheer terror of the unknown living right next door to you.
It was a dense political approach to sci-fi, and it had a phenomenal cast. You had heavy hitters like Mahershala Ali playing Richard Tyler.
Joel Gretsch, Jacqueline McKenzie.
But exactly like Heroes, it was canceled after its 4th season, leaving massive, world-altering cliffhangers completely unresolved.
I have a theory on this, and I want to know where you stand.
Okay, let's hear it.
As a viewer, I actually think an abrupt decapitation is better than a slow decline.
Really? That's a bold take.
Well, think about it. A show like The X-Files slowly overstayed its welcome, wandering aimlessly for years without its main lead, David Duchovny, just kind of diluting its own legacy with mediocre monster hunts.
That's true, the later seasons are rough.
But a show like Heroes, or the 4400, gets decapitated right when it's building to a crescendo. It leaves you furious, yes, but it preserves the potential. It leaves a beautiful corpse. What is worse for the viewer?
This raises a vital question about human psychology and how we consume narratives. From a purely structural and time investment standpoint, you are right that a slow decline is worse because it literally produces hours of mediocre art that you have to endure.
And tarnishes the memory.
But psychologically, abrupt decapitation is vastly more painful due to something called the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect. What is that?
Humans are hardwired for closure. We remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
When a narrative is severed right before the climax, our brains frantically try to finish the pattern. The frustration of never knowing the definitive canon ending creates a unique kind of grief for a dedicated audience.
It is an itch that can never be scratched.
Exactly. It's grief.
That is the perfect word for it. Grief. And if Heroes and the 4400 are tragedies of network ratings and writer strikes, our next subject is the absolute holy grail of lost potential.
We are diving into the world of HBO's Carnivale.
We need to set the stage for just how incredibly rare the documentation we are about to discuss actually is.
Because usually when a show is canceled, its secrets die with it.
Exactly. For over a decade, fans of Carnivale were left completely in the dark after HBO canceled the show at the end of season 2.
The cliffhanger was massive.
But then, we obtained the actual leaked original pitch document written by the show's creator, Daniel Nelf.
Alongside incredibly detailed synopses he later provided in Reddit AMAs and Yahoo group forums.
This isn't fan fiction. This isn't speculation. This is the architect's actual detailed blueprint for the rest of the house that never got built.
And the sheer scale of that blueprint is staggering. To understand what television lost, we have to understand the cosmic rules Snuff established.
The premise of Carnival is not just a spooky traveling circus navigating the 1930s Dust Bowl.
No, it is a literal cosmic proxy war playing out in the dirt of the American Midwest.
According to the pitch document, before the beginning of the Earth, God and Satan fought a celestial war that rocked the foundations of heaven and hell.
They eventually established an uneasy truce. They would never face each other in direct physical confrontation again.
So God creates Earth and man. And the rule of this truce is established. To every single generation of humanity, there is born a creature of light and a creature of darkness.
They're called the Avatara.
They gather followers, they manipulate history, and they fight this cosmic war by proxy. And the lore goes so incredibly deep.
The pitch document details that the very first Avatar was a woman called the Alpha.
Nelf hinted heavily in his AMAs that this was Eve from the Garden of Eden, who lived for centuries, but ultimately died in the Great Flood.
And from her spawned the first 2 Avatara, Cain and Abel.
It is a breathtaking creative swing. Nelf is mapping the entire Judeo-Christian mythology onto a specific magical bloodline and then dropping that bloodline into the most barren, desperate era of American history, the Great Depression.
The story we see in the first 2 seasons of the show is merely the prologue.
Ben Hawkins is the young, reluctant avatar of light, traveling with a rundown carnival.
Brother Justin Crow is the terrifying avatar of darkness, building a massive religious empire in California.
Season 2 ends with a brutal physical confrontation between them, where Justin is stabbed and Ben flees.
But the pitch document reveals that was only supposed to be the end of book 1.
Nelf had 6 full seasons planned. So let's look at the lost season, starting with season 3.
The document states there would have been a significant time jump to 1938.
It opens with an incredible image. Jonesy, the crippled former baseball player and carnival rigger who we thought was murdered in the season 2 finale, is pitching in the World Series for the Chicago Cubs.
His crippled leg is miraculously healed. He's greeting his wife Libby in the stands. It's a genuine miracle.
But while there are miracles for the light, the dark side has severely mutated.
Brother Justin's New Canaan ministry has grown into a massive, terrifying political powerhouse.
But Justin himself is a hollow figurehead. He survived the stabbing in the season 2 finale, but the blade left an inoperable piece of shrapnel mere inches from his heart.
If he uses his dark powers, his heart beats faster, risking the shrapnel tearing his heart apart. So he is reluctant, weakened.
The real, terrifying power now belongs to his sister, Iris.
She is manipulating the ministry and is locked in a bitter season-long rivalry with Sophie.
Sophie, the carnival tarot reader who is now Justin's wife, and possesses her own immense complex powers as the Omega.
And what about Ben, the hero?
The document says Ben is at a new carnival, still traveling with the old boss, Samson. But Ben isn't the innocent, wide-eyed farm boy anymore.
He has grown incredibly dark, paranoid, and reclusive, much like the previous avatar of light, Management, used to be.
The healing he does takes a massive toll. He requires constant medical sutures from the carnival doctor because his physical body is failing him.
He has lost his life force, which the lore calls his vitae divina.
Oh, and one of the wildest details, Lauds, the blind mentalist who was murdered in season 1, is back. But he's a literal mummy.
He returns as a mummified attraction for the sideshow, though he is somehow still psychically aware.
I just love that detail so much. Season 3 builds to a climax where Ben convinces his old crew to leave the encroaching darkness of America and head for Europe.
Which seamlessly sets up season 4, and this is where the genre of the show shifts entirely from a Midwestern Gothic into a global occult thriller.
Season 4 is a desperate race across Europe on the absolute brink of World War II.
Ben and his carnival crew are competing against Justin's emissaries to find ancient manuscripts and powerful talismans to aid the weakened avatars.
Nauf described this season as a hodgepodge of European occultism and esoteric legends.
In this European season, the mummy Lauds actually acts as a mercenary.
A mummy mercenary.
He is selling his psychic secrets to the highest bidder, secretly leaking Ben's locations back to Justin's forces.
But in a moment of horrifying
Już prawie gotowe. Ale najgorsze, jak zawsze, zostawiłem sobie na koniec. Rozdzieracz zapłonu. Z tego co wiem, to już go nie produkują. No ale może w szrocie schowali coś pod ladą?
realization about the darkness he's enabling, Lauds has a profound epiphany.
The document says he ultimately sacrifices himself to save Ben in a major confrontation, finally finding redemption.
And that sets the stage for seasons 5 and 6, the climax of the entire saga.
The timeline shifts again, jumping into 1944 and 1945.
The Avakara have embedded themselves in the ultimate global conflict. Ben and Justin infiltrate the highest levels of the Allied and Axis commands.
Justin is actively working behind the scenes to help develop the atomic bomb, believing it will be the ultimate tool of darkness.
While Ben's people are desperately trying to stop the Manhattan Project.
But here is the massive philosophical twist that I absolutely love. Ben, the Avatar of Light, realizes a profound, devastating truth.
The atomic bomb doesn't represent the end of the world. It represents the end of their world. The age of magic. The age of the Avatar.
Ben realizes that if he doesn't let the Trinity explosion happen, man...
Potrzebuję rozdzieracz zapłonu do malucha. Znajdzie się coś?
Człowieku, ciszej! To nie są truskawki. Takie części wycofane z produkcji są cenniejsze niż kokaina.
No to skąd mam go wziąć? Bez tego kaszlak nie ruszy.
No, na pewno nie ode mnie, ale może zajrzyj na złomowisko. Pilnuje go taki cieć Wojtek. Szepnij, że jesteś ode mnie, to może cię poratuje.
No i super, dzięki za pomoc.
Mankind will remain forever in its infancy.
Utterly dependent on these supernatural gods playing proxy wars with their lives.
He realizes he has to let the bomb go off to usher in the age of reason.
Now, before we fully unpack the weight of Ben walking into that blast, we need to pause and frame a critical element of how this pitch document uses real history.
Yes, this is essential context for understanding the scope of Knopf's world building.
It's really important we are clear here.
The source materials detail that Season 3 would heavily feature real-world historical elements of the 1930s, specifically the rise of fascism in America.
The documents explicitly mention the American Bund, which was a real-world pro-Nazi lobbying group that existed in the U.S.
And state that the villain, Brother Justin, and his Knights of Jericho would be actively distributing virulently racist, anti-Catholic, and anti-Semitic propaganda tracts to build their political power.
And as we analyze this, we want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. We are looking
Okno niech se pan otworzy, jak to szyba się zacina.
No witam, przesyła mnie Dawid ze Szrota. Potrzebuję rozdzielacza zapłonu do Malucha.
Panie, każdy tu przychodzi i coś potrzebuje. A prawdziwy potrzebujący to ja jestem.
No to może pomożemy sobie nawzajem. Co tam trzeba? Jakaś zaliczka? Flaszeczka?
A skąd? Ja nie pijący.
O, to coś nowego. Religia panu zabrania, czy co?
Gorzej. Żona. Tak czy inaczej, przydaj się pan na coś. Potrzeba mi wygrzebać trochę opon ze złomu, posegregować i ładnie poukładać na kubki.
Nie no, to zajebista różnica będzie. Ale, panie Wojtku, za to mnie pan pokochasz. Bo ja się nie pytam, jaki jest w tym sens. Ja się po prostu biorę do roboty.
at this purely as the architectural blueprint of a fictional television narrative.
Knopf rooted Justin's villainy in the very real, very dark history of 1930s fascism to explain the horrifying nature of this monster.
Obviously, we are strictly reporting on the historical fiction contained within the pitch documents. We take no sides, and we absolutely fundamentally do not endorse any of the hateful viewpoints or propaganda that the creator designed for the villains to use.
Understanding this historical context is just key to seeing how Knopf built his antagonist. Thank you. It is vital to separate the historical horror utilized for narrative stakes from the analysis of the narrative mechanics themselves.
Okay, so returning to those mechanics, I think Ben Hawkins is the ultimate subversion of the tragic hero. I want your take on this. He walks into a literal nuclear blast at Alamogordo, evaporating himself, Sophie, and their child just to force humanity to grow up.
It's a staggering image.
It is the ultimate sacrifice of a parent letting go of a child so the child can learn to walk on its own. Doesn't that completely flip the script on how fantasy stories usually end?
It is an incredible, almost staggering subversion of the chosen one trope. Usually in serialized fantasy, the savior's job is to defeat the Dark Lord and then rule in peace, or at least exist as a protector.
Like Aragorn or Harry Potter.
Right. But Knopf argues that the mere existence of the savior itself prevents human evolution. If the gods are always there to catch us, we never learn to fly.
Ben destroys the chessboard entirely.
To pitch that concept for a television finale in the early 2000s is breathtakingly ambitious.
And to fully grasp why Ben's sacrifice feels so earned, you have to look closer at the pieces on that chessboard. We need to talk about the carnival itself.
The pitch document isn't just a bulleted summary of plot points. It's written like a sprawling historical dossier compiled by a researcher decades later.
And what is amazing to me is how Daniel Nauf uses the concept of the unreliable narrator to build out the biographies of his own characters. He creates this brilliant meta puzzle for the reader.
This is perhaps one of the most effective world-building techniques I have ever seen in a pitch document. By framing the lore through conflicting historical documents, police reports, and memoirs, Nauf creates intense friction.
There is a massive gap between the grand myths the characters claim about themselves and the gritty, pathetic reality that the historical record caught them in.
Let's start with Samson, played so brilliantly by Michael J. Anderson.
He's the manager of the carnival, the guy calling the shots. His real name is Edgar Leiber.
In his own telling, the stories he tells around the campfire, his life is a grand, romantic American adventure.
He claims he ran numbers in Hell's Kitchen for a powerful gangster named Seamus Callahan. He claims he sang Irish tunes on bars, that he worked directly for P.T. Barnum, rubbed shoulders with Buffalo Bill,
And even shook hands with the Queen of England.
But then, right on the next page, the pitch document presents a dry, factual police report from the Kansas City Police Department.
And the reality's much less glamorous. Edgar Leiber wasn't rubbing shoulders with royalty. He was arrested after getting into a drunken, pathetic brawl at a cheap brothel called the Lucky Seven.
The report states he threw a brick through the front window and engaged in a physical altercation with a known panderer.
And it gets worse. When the police questioned him, Samson insisted he was a white knight. He claimed he was rescuing a girl who was being held against her will.
But the police interviewed the girl, and she completely dismissed him. She simply said Samson was just a boyfriend and that he was, quote, nutty.
It completely punctures his self-mythologizing. He isn't a grand adventurer. He's a lonely, angry man who got into a bar fight over a prostitute.
And we see this exact same duality applied to our two main protagonists at the carnival, Ben Hawkins and Clayton Jones.
Ben is introduced to the audience in season 1 as a 17-year-old innocent dirt farmer. His mother died a slow, agonizing death from stomach cancer.
The local merchant trust foreclosed on their barren farm, leaving him with absolutely nothing. He frames his entry into the carnival as being shanghaied against his will.
And he possesses these incredible, literal, Christ-like healing powers.
The document includes an
Dobra, poukładane. Świetnie się wyróżnia na tle całej reszty tego bajzlu, no ale jak se tam pan chciał? To co, poratujesz pan tym rozdzielaczem?
Jakim rozdzielaczem?
Rozdzielaczem zapłonu do Malucha. Miałem go dostać w zamian za pomoc.
Ja nic takiego nie powiedziałem. Nawet nie wiem, czy mam tu ten wichajster. To jest złamanie burdel, że se pan przychodzisz i wybierasz. Ale niech będzie. Moja strata. Odźwigałeś się opon, to se teraz poszukaj, co ci tam trzeba.
Kurwa. Ja pierdolę. No.
excerpt from a memoir written by one of the sideshow performers describing a moment where Ben heals a broken neck. The prose is stunning.
She describes his hands shining so brightly they left spots in her vision, glowing so much you could see the bones inside them like an X-ray.
She describes a sudden, sweltering hot wind and the overwhelming scent of roses filling the tent. It is purely miraculous, divine imagery.
Yet the historical records in the dossier reveal a starkly different context. Right before joining the carnival, the records show that Ben and a friend named Bozo robbed a bank in Texas.
Wait, his friend's name was Bozo.
Yes, Bozo. He isn't just a pure, innocent vessel of celestial light. He is a desperate, armed kid who committed a federal crime just to survive the crushing poverty of the Dust Bowl.
And Jonesy, the head rigger with the bad leg, who acts as the gruff moral center of the camp. His backstory is wild.
He was a genuine baseball prodigy, a star pitcher drafted by the Chicago White Sox in 1914. He had a golden future.
But then World War I happens. He joins the 115th Infantry, ships off to France, and in a moment of insane bravery, single-handedly takes out a German machine gun nest capturing over 100 prisoners.
He wins the Medal of Honor, but his leg is crippled in the process, permanently ending his baseball dreams.
So what does a crippled, decorated war hero do in the Roaring Twenties? According to the arrest records, he drifted to California and became an offshore rum runner.
An enforcer for a gangster named Spats O'Shea during Prohibition.
The juxtaposition of wearing the Medal of Honor while smuggling illegal gin from Ensenada is a perfect tragic encapsulation of the lost generation.
The texture is just incredible, and the sideshow performers get the exact same treatment.
Take Lila Villanueva, the bearded lady. In the carnival, she is billed as the mysterious bearded lady of Brussels.
But the researcher notes she was actually from Mexico City. She was part of a famous, glamorous high-wire act called the Flying Villa Lobos, before tragedy struck.
Ty kurwa, działa! Nie no, jestem w szoku. Taka okazja wymaga specjalnego trudu.
Ventriloquist dummy.
Naprzód!
Which is just a fantastic, deeply weird carnival detail.
But the best part is an excerpt from her unpublished memoir. She claims she once filleted Henry Ford for $1,000, and that the auto tycoon was so happy he threw in a free Model T car.
Unbelievable.
I mean, I have to ask you, did Daniel Knauf write these wildly contradictory historical documents just to prove that all carnies are con artists at heart, even to the historian trying to research them decades later?
It's more profound than just making them con artists. What Knauf is doing here is using history to ground the supernatural.
How do you mean?
In a story about angels and demons, glowing hands, resurrections, and telepathy, the audience needs an anchor so it doesn't just float away into silly fantasy. By giving these characters gritty, hyper-specific historical realities, tying them to the sinking of the RMS Lusitania or the Kansas City Parks Department or the Chicago White Sox, the magic feels earned.
It feels like it exists in our actual tangible world.
No co tam, Bronka, co się dzieje?
Pamiętasz ty mojego Zenka?
No tak średnio bym powiedział.
No Zenek, chłop mój, no. Wylazł na kalenicę, siedział chwilę, potem próbował zejść, no i zleciał. I taki był jego koniec. Pijany był. Nie powiem, trochę dychłam. Z alkoholikiem w domu ciężko, wiesz jak jest.
Co? Teraz spadł?
Nie, gdzie teraz? W 63.
Bronka, do czego mi dupę zawracasz?
Bo to się wydarzyło znowu. Tym razem Andrzejek, mój pierworodny, wlazł na dach. Krzyczał coś, że jest hardcorem. Bałem się, że mi pierdokrot urwie. No a teraz nie wie jak zejść. Janusz, pomóż mi, co?
Pokaż, gdzie ten cymbał? Kurwa macie, Andrzej, jak ty tam wlazłeś?
Nie będę, nie będę.
Przydałaby się jakaś drabina. Może coś w szopie znajdę? Co to za chałupa bez drabiny? A, zapomniałem, u Bronki jestem. No dobra, chyba trzeba coś zmajstrować na szybko. Pod sufitem jest jakaś belka. Tylko jak ja ją ściągnę?
hidden just beneath the surface of the Great Depression. The contrast makes the magic brighter.
Exactly. Look at Ernst Lodz, the blind mentalist. He isn't just a spooky guy with rolled back white eyes. The dossier reveals he was a minor aristocrat in Warsaw.
He murdered a French count in a pistol duel over an affair with the countess.
He was literally sentenced to the guillotine and only escaped execution because he used his psychic abilities to gather blackmail material on high society French officials.
And we see the immense tragedy in Sophie and her mother, Apollonia. Apollonia wasn't just a sideshow act in a trailer, she was the queen of the gypsies.
She read tarot cards for First Ladies Frances Cleveland and Ellen Wilson before a series of massive strokes left her completely catatonic.
And the twist with Sophie, she doesn't actually have the power to read cards. She has a localized, intense telepathic link to her mother, who is doing the reading from her catatonic state in the trailer, transmitting the thoughts into Sophie's mind.
And the lore reveals that Apollonia is actively using her own vast mental powers to shield Sophie from discovering her true nature. Sophie is the Omega, the destroyer.
It's a mother desperately using every ounce of her psychic energy to hide her daughter from a cosmic draft lord.
Contrast that dark, intense, suffocating family dynamic with the Potter twins, Alexandria and Caledonia.
Usually in carnival lore, conjoined twins have tragic, deeply exploitative backgrounds, like the famous real-life Hilton sisters, who were basically kept as slaves by their managers.
But Nauf entirely subverts this trope. The Potter twins were adopted by a loving, warm midwife in Banff, Canada. They had a completely normal, incredibly happy childhood.
They only joined the carnival circuit to pay for their paralyzed stepfather's medical bills. They sang beautiful close harmony, saved their money responsibly, and retired. Caledonia even became a successful novelist under the pen name Janus Bunker.
Janus Bunker, a nod to the Roman god of two faces. Janus and the original Siamese twins, Chang and Ing Bunker.
It's so clever, the layers upon layers. But speaking of two faces, we have to talk about the dark side of this proxy war. Every great hero, every deeply textured ensemble needs a terrifying villain to push against.
And that brings us to the rise of Brother Justin. His backstory in this pitch document is, without a doubt, the darkest, most psychologically disturbing thing in the entire lore.
It really is a masterful study in generational trauma, the sublimation of guilt, and the exact mechanics of how a monster is made.
Justin's real name isn't Justin Crow, it's Alexei Belikov.
His father, Lucius Belikov, who the audience later comes to know as Management, the mysterious entity running the carnival from behind a curtain, was an avatar of light.
He was a wealthy Russian aristocrat and a decorated officer in the Tsar's army. But Lucius had these horrifying, vivid premonitions. He foresaw his infant son's dark destiny.
He knew with absolute
Taka
certainty
trochę
that
średnia to
Alexei
drabina
was
ze
the
szczebli.
avatar of
Dobra, wiem.
darkness.
Potnę
one
kłody
morning
na
at the breakfast
cyrkularce i z
table, the
drewinek
avatar
będą
of light
szczeble jak
attempts to
talala.
strangle his own 2-year-old son to death to save the world from future atrocities.
And he is only stopped because his wife and daughter physically beat him off the child. The mother, Plemena, is already suffering from severe, untreated paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that is drastically exacerbated by the trauma of her husband trying to murder their baby.
She flees Russia and escapes to America with Alexei and his older sister Iris, but she is completely unhinged.
She aggressively indoctrinates Iris, who is just a child herself, with the absolute terrifying belief that invisible assassins sent by their father are constantly hunting them in the shadows.
They live like fugitives, jumping at every sound. And then, the ultimate defining tragedy occurs. They are involved in a horrific, mangled train crash in the American wilderness.
The mother is killed on impact. Iris and 4-year-old Justin survive, but they are wandering the wreckage, traumatized and alone. They stumble across another survivor of the crash.
The man is dazed, and crucially, he happens to speak Russian.
Iris, completely brainwashed by her mother's paranoia, instantly assumes this injured man is one of the father's assassins.
The man struggles, and 4-year-old Justin, acting purely on a primal instinct to protect his older sister, uses his nascent supernatural power to snap the man's neck.
It is his first murder. He is 4 years old. And the psychological mechanism here is vital. It is completely sublimated.
The trauma of the crash, the death of his mother, and the sheer horror of killing a man cause Justin's mind to bury the memory so deep it essentially fractures his psyche.
They are eventually rescued from the wilderness and raised by a kind, upstanding minister, Reverend Norman Balthus.
Justin grows up genuinely believing he is a devout, righteous man of God, completely unaware of the murderous darkness sleeping inside his own mind.
But the darkness always finds an outlet. It seeps out. Justin joins an organization called the Knights of Jericho in the 1920s.
Now, the document notes that the Knights of Jericho started as a relatively benign social fraternity, but it mutated into a virulent, hateful organization.
And Justin is the one who masterminds a ruthless, brilliant palace coup to take it over. He discovers that the previous leader, Charles Hennessy, is having an affair.
Justin publicly frames it as the tragic seduction of a fair, chaste flower to ruin Hennessy's reputation, but the dossier reveals the woman, Hannah Jean Lynch, was actually a known prostitute that Justin likely hired or blackmailed specifically to set the trap.
He weaponizes morality. He uses the aesthetics of righteousness to destroy his enemies. He takes over the organization and builds the Temple of Jericho in the Nebraska Badlands.
It is described as a massive, brutalist Art Deco compound. There's a great historical note where Eleanor Roosevelt famously describes the temple as a great, vulgar, headless jackal.
He creates an absolute empire of radio syndication, political influence, and shell corporations.
And his hatred is so incredibly specific. He holds this deep, pathological hatred for the Romani people and carnival folk.
He constantly incites his moms to burn their tents, to drive them out of towns, and to subject them to tar and feathers, which the document notes often proved fatal. It is literal ethnic cleansing, masked as religious purification.
And this is why Justin is such a profoundly effective villain. When we look at the mechanics of overarching threats, unlike the later seasons of The X-Files where the aliens had shifting, confusing motivations, Justin's evil is rooted entirely in psychology.
He's a deeply traumatized child who sublimated his first murder. He took his absolute terror of his literal father and projected it outward onto the world.
He weaponized American bureaucracy and
Ronka, trzymaj tego swojego kaskadera. Proponuję go trochę bardziej pilnować następnym razem.
Pilnować? O, nie. Ta stara dupa to już dawno powinna iść za swoje, a nie matce stresu przysparza. No ty zakał, ty. Janusz, niech ci Bozia w dzieciach wynagrodzi.
W tobie się zakochałem.
fundamentalist religion to hunt down the very concept of magic and wonder because magic and wonder are what broke his family. He is psychologically dense and utterly terrifying because his evil feels so human.
He was almost even more terrifying on screen. The pitch document notes that HBO actually forced Now to cut some of the more bizarre, visceral details of Justin's manifestation.
Network notes can be fascinating.
The notes say that during the exact moment Ben Hawkins got his powers at the carnival, Justin was miles away. But he was supposed to have a physical fit where he sprouted literal baboon teeth.
That is horrifying.
Right. And there's a scene in the show where a statue of Mary bleeds stigma.
Janusz? Co taki uśmiechnięty? Stało się coś?
Lepiej usiąść, bo padniesz. Naprawiłem kaszlaka. Przyjechałem to opić i lojalnie ostrzegam. Na jednym piwie się nie skończy.
O proszę, komuś tu się powodzi. Nowa bryka. Picie w lokalu, paczki z Ameryki.
Ta, w lokalu. Nie rozśmieszaj mnie. Zara, jaka paczka?
Listonosz mi opowiadał, że dziś ci przywiózł od jakiejś ciotki z Ameryki czy coś. I jak go znam, to teraz rozgaduje to po całej wiosce.
O cholera, to lecę. O ile jeszcze tam jest.
Siemano, kuzyn. To ja, Adrian, syn ciotki Alki. Piszę do ciebie from America, man. Co prawda, ja przyjechałem tu do pracy na zmywak na 2 miesiące, ale już w sercu czuję, że pora na zmianę obywatelstwa. Ach, ta Poland. Niewiele z niej pamiętam, ale kiedyś wrócę for sure. A wtedy to ja potrzebuję wozu. Mój poprzedni car został stolen, także wiesz, ty mi musisz załatwić nowe 4 kółka. W paczce jest trochę kasy. Weź coś ogarnij taniego i wyremontuj. Aha, tylko najważniejsze. Auto musi być amerykańskie. Nie mam zamiaru jeździć jak plebs. No offense. Muszę look jak somebody, kiedy podjadę pod remizę, nie? P.S. W paczce dorzucam moją starą konsolę do grania, żebyś zobaczył trochę świata na tym twoim zadupiu. No, niech ci służy. God bless America. Adrian.
Aj, kuzyn, jak ty coś wymyślisz. Wiocha taka, że psy dupami szczekają, skąd ja ci tu wezmę amerykańskie auto? Fajnie. Może dzisiaj rano nie miałem jeszcze konsoli, za to teraz nie mam też telewizora. Dzięki, kuzyn. No nic, poszukajmy mu tej amerykańskiej fury. Może przynajmniej zapłaci w dolarach. Najlepiej zacząć od tablicy ogłoszeń.
But originally Knopf wrote that it was supposed to bleed actual writhing maggots. HBO stepped in and said that was just too far for their audience.
Even without the maggots or the baboon teeth, the core psychological horror remains entirely intact.
I want to ask you about one final detail regarding Justin because it fascinates me. The pitch document contains this one intriguing historical note. It says that Brother Justin completely vanishes from the historical record in 1938 without a single trace.
Just gone.
His massive church collapses into ruin, his radio empire dissolves, and nobody in history knows what happened to him. It is the perfect setup for a mystery. Why do we love mysteries that never get solved? Why does the fact that we will never actually see Justin's disappearance filmed on a soundstage make it somehow more powerful in my mind?
Because an unsolved mystery demands the audience's active participation. When an author leaves a gap, specifically a well-structured, intentionally designed gap, the human imagination rushes in to fill it.
It's the Zeigarnik effect again.
Exactly. And the mind will always conjure something far more terrifying, far more resonant, and far more personal than whatever a director could capture on a camera. The unwritten ending becomes infinite. It lives in your head forever.
Wow. That is exactly it. The unwritten ending becomes infinite. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's do a quick recap.
We started by looking at the structural evolution of supernatural television, contrasting the slow, atmospheric, syndication-driven dread of The X-Files with the fast-paced, emotionally resolved serialization of Fringe.
Then we felt the intense heartbreak of truncated network shows, looking at how the writers' strike and plummeting ratings abruptly decapitated the brilliant setups of Heroes and the bureaucratic paranoia of the 4400.
And finally, we explored the staggering, unfilmed genius of the Carnival pitch document. We examine the massive cosmic rules of the proxy war, the deep, contradictory character biographies that utilized unreliable narrators to ground the magic, and the terrifying psychological profile of a villain shaped entirely by generational trauma and sublimated guilt.
If you are a learner who loves going down rabbit holes, parsing through deep lore, and connecting the historical dots, I think this is the ultimate lesson of this deep dive. Sometimes the absolute best stories aren't the ones that get to air on TV.
Sometimes the most fascinating universes are the blueprints left behind in pitch documents, translated forum posts, and archived Reddit threads by the architects who dreamed them up.
The potential of the blueprint is almost more beautiful than the execution of the building.
Which brings me to a final thought I would like to leave you with today. Daniel Nelf envisioned the epic culmination of his entire saga as the Trinity atomic bomb test at Alamogordo.
Right back to where we started.
He saw this as the exact devastating moment mankind traded wonder for reason, purposefully forcing the end of the Age of Magic so that humanity could finally grow up and take control of its own destiny. As you go about your day in our highly rational, incredibly tech-driven, data-obsessed modern world, I want you to ask yourself a question.
What's the question?
Is our modern obsession with building these massive, intricate television mythologies just a subconscious attempt to recreate the Age of Magic that we lost?
Oh, that is a profound thought to chew on. It's like we're all just wandering around a beautifully decorated haunted house, desperately looking for a ghost we know deep down isn't there. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
O proszę, Mustang to może nie jest, ale jakby go trochę potrasować. A Bożenka co taka zmartwiona? Stało się co?
A, kłopot mam. Pamiętasz ty mojego starego?
Zbycha? No pewnie, że tak. Co tam u niego? Chory podobno.
Martwy. Ale zanim umarł, powiedział, że zakopał wszystkie nasze pieniądze w słoiku, żeby nikt nie ukradł.
Pieniądze? A gdzie?
A właśnie zapomniał. Jak z nim ostatni raz gadała, to mówił coś o szopie i mapie, ale mógł bredzić, trzeźwy nie był. Oj, lubił gorzałkę ten mój Zbychu, a gorzałka lubiła jego.
Jak chcesz, to się mogę rozejrzeć po tej szopie. A nóż mi się coś rzuci w oczy.
A idź, proszę, próbuj. Szopa za domem stoi. Wiesz, gdzie mieszkam, ale cię tam co znajdzie.
Nowe miasto, 9 pięter, winda znów z***ana. Po melanżu, więc schodami w górę drugie piętro, trzecie, siódme, jak wysoko. Zaraz mnie wyniosą w trumnie, już mi lata oko. Bieda u nas, że aż piszczy, ale klimat się zgadza. Wifon to twój cały obiad, o luksusy nie zawadzasz. Jeden dres masz na sobie, drugi stara bierze w pralce. Razem w jednym smutku, razem w jednej walce. Pod mieszkanie się dowlokłem, noga już mnie boli. Kluczy szukam po kieszeniach, coś mnie zaraz popierdoli, kurwa. Do cholery, gdzie ja znowu je przepiłem. U grubego gdzieś na chacie chyba zostawiłem. Bieda u nas, że aż piszczy, ale klimat się zgadza. Wifon to twój cały obiad, o luksusy nie zawadasz. Jeden dres masz na sobie, drugi stara bierze w pralce. Razem w jednym smutku, razem w jednej walce. To już baranówka. Patrz o 2 godziny. Dalej.
No witam. Ja w sprawie ogłoszenia. Podobno sprzedaje pan samochód.
Ja sprzedaję to trochę za dużo powiedziane. Żona kazała mi sprzedać, bo musimy synowi studia we mieście opłacić. W każdym razie nie mam czasu na zbędne gadanie. I sceny też już nie spuszczę.
Aha, jakieś szczegóły? Coś? O, ile ma przebiegu?
To zależy od którego kręcenia liczyć. Panie, to nie jest salon. Auto jakie jest, każdy widzi. Swoje już przeszło. Bierzesz pan czy nie?
Dobra, biorę. To i tak za kasę kuzyna.
Gratuluję. Jak znajdę chwilę, to je panu przywiozę pod dom.
Bo co? No jakbym ja go wziął, to pewnie się rozkraczy zaraz za bramą, nie?
Nie, po prostu to auto trzeba traktować z uczuciem i wyczuciem. To nie jest sprzęt dla byle kogo. A teraz wyjazd z mojego podwórka. Idę być bardzo zajęty.
Gdy pewnego lata twoją twarz ujrzałem uczuciem gorącym, wtedy zapałałem. Twoje czarne włosy, oczy pełne snu, w myślach mięknie pewność.
Chuj, będzie.
A skarb mój odnaleźć ochotę masz srogą, to inną zupełnie ci przyjdzie iść drogą. Wpierw w stronę kościoła żwawiutko się kieruj i gdzie on skierowan swój kompas wysteruj. Gdy dojdziesz do złomu, to dalej idź w krzaki, lecz wpierw niech ci droga zakurzy gumiaki. A kiedy bzyczenie okrutne zasłyszysz, po trasie tak długiej, że ledwo już dyszysz, to jako ksiądz rzecze, wiedz, że coś się dzieje. I dzielnie maszeruj w straszliwe te knieje. Rozglądaj się bystro za ziemi kupeczką. A gdy ją odgarniesz, ukaże się wieczko. Słoika, co pełno pieniędzy ma w sobie, a wcześniej był cały w mej skromnej osobie.
No, zajebiście. Znalazł się Indiana Jones z Podkarpacia. Najśmieszniej będzie, jak się okaże, że dziadkowi coś pod kopułą nie stykało i tak naprawdę nie ma żadnego słoika. Ale co się ołaże po lasach, to moje. Chuj, będzie. No.
chyba mi spadasz. Coś mi się stało z oponą. Da rady to naprawić. Nie dojadę do warsztatu, please.
Karolcian, dla ciebie wszystko. Już patrzę. Załatwimy to tutaj na miejscu.
A skarb mój odnaleźć ochotę masz srogą, to inną zupełnie ci przyjdzie iść drogą. Wpierw w stronę kościoła żwawiutko się kieruj i gdzie on skierowan swój kompas wysteruj. Gdy dojdziesz do złomu, to dalej idź w krzaki, lecz wpierw niech ci droga zakurzy gumiaki. A kiedy bzyczenie okrutne zasłyszysz, po trasie tak długiej, że ledwo już dyszysz, to jako ksiądz rzecze, wiedz, że coś się dzieje. I dzielnie maszeruj w straszliwe te knieje. Rozglądaj się bystro za ziemi kupeczką. A gdy ją odgarniesz, ukaże się wieczko. Słoika, co pełno pieniędzy ma w sobie, a wcześniej był cały w mej skromnej osobie.
Niech Bożenka popatrzy, co mam.
Łobatko znalazłeś.
No to co? Chyba się należy parę złociszy znaleźnego, nie?
A bierz wszystko. Na co mi te pieniądze? Jak na mnie śmieci, tak za rogiem czyha. Dla mnie tam nieważne, co było w słoiku. Ważne, gdzie był ten słoik. Wspaniała pamiątka.
Pamiątka?
A no, a szok, że jest cały. Pewnej niedzieli Zbychu daje mi kamerkę i mówi: Fuszerka, nagrywaj. No to nagrywam. Patrzę, a on ściąga portki i
Dobra, zmieniłem zdanie, wolę nie wiedzieć. To serio mogę sobie zachować całą tę kasę? Przecież to jest kilkaset tysięcy.
właściwie to ponad 1 000 000
Ja pierdolę, jest to bogaty.
starych złotych. A na nowe to będzie ze 30 złotych. No nie wydaj wszystkiego naraz.
Oj chuj mi w dupę.
W tobie się zakochałem.